Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to W Podcast. I'm Wolvy, he's SaucyJay. We have a special guest today, and we also have season 2 now up and running. So, a lot of exciting things to talk about. But first, let's introduce our guest. This is Katsa, and she is a Mythic Plus player into a very high level. But I'll just throw it straight to you and let you introduce yourself first to our audience.
Okay. Hi, I'm Katsa, or also known as Yumi, my in-game name. And I've been playing Retail WoW for about a year, starting in January 2024. I got the Mythic Plus 0.1% title in Dragonflight Season 3, which is when I started playing, Season 4, and then the War Within Season 1. I actually got title on 3 characters, on my tank, AUG, and my healer. And this season, my goal is to also get it on a DPS character, so that I'll have it on every character or every role.
We don't count Aug as a DPS.
Yep, people are going to give me that. Oh, AUG doesn't really count, so I'm gonna play a real DPS character this season.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I have like a ton of questions just from what you said, but let me see if I got this correct. So you've been playing for a little over a year, and you managed to get the 1% title on a tank, on a healer, and on AUG, whatever that is, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
I actually played Classic WoW for about 4.5 years. I started playing WoW through Classic actually. And my husband introduced me to that game because he played it when he was a kid, and then when he heard that Classic was coming out, he just tried to ask me to play, and I was a little iffy at first because I had never played an MMO, and I know that I'm a very grindy person. So if I was going to get into an MMO, I would probably just not stop playing and get addicted, which is exactly what happened. And then 4 years later, I reached the end of Wrath Classic, and a lot of my friends that played with me decided to quit because they didn't want to play Kata, and then that's kind of the timing when I started playing retail.
Okay. So how did you do that transition? Because I know people who played retail and they said, that's too much for me. I'm going to go back and play classic. But you're like the first person who hasn't played retail and played classic and it's like, oh, let me go to retail. And apparently you enjoy it since you stayed here for a year and managed to climb to the top of the ladder. How was that transition? What made you jump into retail? Apart from your friends quitting, of course.
So that is a very interesting question. I actually played a little bit of Shadowlands, like just first couple weeks. I leveled the character and whatever. That was during Nax launch, so about a year into playing Classic, and everyone knows Vanilla Classic. There's really nothing going on. It's mostly just hitting a target dummy at all times. You're just pressing one button. I played a Resto Shaman at the time, and there was really nothing going on. And I came from playing League of Legends. Like, I was a very competitive support. I was Masters in that game, and I just always wanted to play something very competitive. So going from that to Classic, even though I was in a speedrun guild, we would always like PTR and everything and do speedruns and roam first and everything. It still wasn't really competitive enough for me. So as soon as I kind of knew what World of Warcraft was, I just always looked towards retail. Like I watched the Castle Nathria Race to World first, and that's kind of what got me into like this kind of competitive scene. And I heard about Mythic Plus too, but I just never really got into it at the time because I was still so invested in Classic. I became a GM in TBC, and I actually led a guild to Realm First Sunwell. And then in Wrath, I stayed as the GM all the way until the end. So I played a tiny bit of Shadowlands Season 1, never really got anywhere, just casually on my off time while playing Classic. And then I played also the start of Dragonflight Season 1, also not really anything, just like leveling a character and doing a couple dungeons very casually. Just never really got into it, but I always wanted to dabble into retail. So then when the timing came after Wrath, that was when classes got a little more complicated, and it wasn't just pressing one button anymore. Raids started getting mechanics, such as in Ulduar, there were hard modes, and there were guilds that just couldn't clear the content at that point. It was getting hard enough to the point where it's becoming retail. And at the end of ICC was when I was finally like, okay, maybe I kind of know more about the game now, especially because I became a GM. And then after that is when I really started to understand the game, because I had to be a leader. I had to tell my guild what to do. There was no one telling me what to do anymore. I had to make all the decisions and do all the research myself. So that's when I thought, okay, finally, maybe I'm ready to actually give retail a try this time. And I did. And then here I am now.
It's awesome.
And wasn't it a little bit overwhelming jumping into retail? Because as you said, back in the day, there's like one buttons. Maybe there's two or three buttons. And you jump into retail, there's like 40 buttons. How was that
Yeah, so
experience?
I think it was overwhelming when I tried to do Shadowlands when I was still kind of new to WoW. But 4 years later, when TBC and Wrath introduced more mechanics to the game, so Wrath raids had a little more of like the swirlies, dodging swirlies, or like soaking, and all the retail mechanics. They were a little introduced at that point. And then Affliction Warlock had like about 5 buttons, like you had your haunt, your corruption, all that stuff that you keep up. And it was more like retail-esque, even though it's still classic, but it was more of an easier transition. And at that point, I actually had 40 characters in Wrath. So I was raiding like 3 times a day, or 3 to 5 times a day, including 10 mans. And I played a lot. I played 4 Fury Warriors, and I got 4 Shadowmourns, and I just went really ham in that game. So when I played retail, Mythic Plus seemed like the perfect mode for me to get into, because you could spam that mode without having to level a new character. I had one character at the time. I started as a Disc Priest, and I was like, wow, I don't need to wait for lockouts anymore in this game. I can just keep spamming however much I want, and that's exactly what I like. Um, and then I quickly learned about having meta. I kind of knew about like meta back in Classic, because there were some classes that were really good, like Vanilla Classic. Fury Warrior was by far the best class, and I kind of knew about that, but I didn't really know about like retail meta. It's a little different, because in retail M plus, if you don't play the meta class, you're basically not really getting invited to any keys. So I quickly learned after I started playing retail, when my Disc Priest stopped getting invited. If you guys played that season, it was Atal Dazar was one of the dungeons that I really could not get into on my Disc Priest, because every group wanted a Mistweaver monk for the statue for baiting,
Yeah.
and that was when I finally started leveling my second character and main swapping to Mistweaver. And that season, I actually got title on Mistweaver. So um, the difference between my Disc Priest, like barely pushing 3,500 at that point, versus re-rolling the Mistweaver 2 weeks later, already catching up because I could finally get into keys, and then slowly like just learning more and more, and getting to play more because I'm on a meta class that can actually get into keys, was the difference that I needed to see. That and is the reason why now I'm just always playing meta and always making sure I'm ready to main swap whatever. The War Within season 1 is when I finally started playing every single healer spec. I was like, I'm gonna gear every character. I'm gonna do vault keys on every character every week, and then I finally. I was playing Resto Shaman at the start of season 1, and then halfway through, Disc Priest became meta, and I was ready to swap at that point. My priest was already 620 item level at the time, and I was like, "Yep, I'm ready." And that's where I am now. I'm just doing wall keys. I already have my third character above 2k IO now, so I'm just always ready now. Every season, that's my goal.
And do you enjoy that process, or you're just doing it because you have to, knowing that down the line you might have to switch your main?
I've always been a multi-classer. So even back in Classic, like I told you, I had a lot of alts that I played every week. And I've always enjoyed learning new classes. I obviously have a favorite. It's Mistweaver is definitely my favorite healer. But I did really enjoy playing Disc Priest last season, and I played Resto Druid in Dragonflight season 4. It's actually doing really well right now as well. I played a little bit of it a couple days ago, And I think the main thing about this is I can understand the game better. That's in my opinion. I can understand the game better if I play different classes and different specs, and that is what is interesting to me. My ultimate goal is to be a really good player, not just known for one character, or not just known for like really good at one spec. I want to be a well-rounded player, which is why I also went for a title on tank and og last season, and trying to play DPS this season. Um, and it's not only it not only helps you become better at that role, but it also helps you become better at healing. If I understand what other roles do and what they need, then I will understand better how to heal from my perspective and from their perspective.
That's a pretty good motivation, and I think pretty good advice. So before we jump into the current season, just looking back to your journey, one more question that I want to ask is, if somebody is just starting playing retail, although there's not probably that many people that do that, but if somebody like us has been playing for a while now and we're thinking, ooh, maybe I want to run for a title next season, so what advice would you give to people like that, as you've been there now and you actually managed to do it in probably a record short time? What would you advise somebody else who is actually wanting to go and play for the title?
So, first of all, you can get title on every spec and every class every season. That's always what people tell you. However, if you're mainly pugging and you don't really know anyone, and you're just trying to get into keys, the number one thing you should do is play the meta. I know that sounds very bad and people hate that. I also don't really like that. Actually, that's one thing I like about the season, because there is no like real meta right now. You can play with whatever you want. But unfortunately, the number one thing is you just have to play what's good. And you have to do whatever you can to get into as many keys as you can so that you can practice. I think the number one thing, hardest thing for someone that is new to the game is getting the practice. So, for example, if you had like a friend that can just get you into a high key, then you can just prog that key and get in very easily because of your friend, and then eventually you'll probably time that key. But the hard thing about pugging is you don't get those opportunities. So you have to take what you can get. So when I first started playing, I would only host my own keys, which is what I do now. I always host my own keys because unless I need a specific item from a specific dungeon and I need that key, I will always host my own key because it saves way more time, and you want to be efficient with your time. I know I have a lot of time, but I know some people, they only have a couple hours in a day to play, and if all that time they're spending is sitting in queue and not really doing anything, they're not getting anywhere. So, um, at the very least, I know a couple people who, a couple streamers who pug. Dalgroth is one of them. He's a tank main and he pugs every single day, every single stream. I always see him listing his keys, and as long as he can get to play the game, that's all that matters. He got title last season as well, just pugging, because he would just. I know he's a tank, so it's a little different, but at the very least, he can just make his own key all the time and just always make sure he's playing the game. Making sure he's practicing the game.
Yeah, he's great. I actually play with him. Hopefully we can probably get him on the podcast too. But let me expand a little bit on this. So you're saying, okay, host your own key, but then can you explain how much time and effort actually takes? Because from what I'm getting, you're actually plugging your keys, right? And some people think, okay, I'm just gonna log in, I'm gonna do a few keys, I'm gonna get the title. But in reality, you actually have to commit a lot of time and effort playing the game, understanding the game, getting better at the game. So can you tell us a little bit more about how much effort actually goes into getting the title?
Yeah, sure. So let's go back to my first season playing because that was when I was new. So I started playing 3 months into Dragonflight season 3. That season was very long. It was 6 months. So even after I started playing, there were 3 months left of the season. When I started playing, at the time, I didn't really know anything about retail itself. But from my previous experience, I knew there are guides, there are tier lists, there are add-ons that you need to do. You can look at logs, and then there was Raider IO. So that's all I knew. I started playing Disc Priest because at the time Disc Priest was on the tier list, S tier at the time. However, the meta was already shifting when I started. I didn't know this when I started until like maybe a month after playing, that people were starting to play VDH with Resto Druid and Og and everything. Pugs were actually playing Mistweaver with melee comp, and that is what I played. But so first of all, you need to spend a lot of time on getting a good UI. So I had to make sure I could see all the casts that were going on. People, as a healer, you need good rate frames that you can see defensives, you can see casts. Make sure you can track everything that you need to know. That was the first thing. Make sure you have good keybinds and everything. I guess there are some players that click, but that's not very common. And I try to keybind everything that's and make it really good. That's one thing I learned from Classic. So some of it does transfer over to retail. And then good add-ons. That's also something I learned from Classic. We also had weak auras for raids and stuff. So that's one thing. Good UI so you can see everything. I think I'm saying this because I know some friends who just don't really know when damage is coming out, and I'm like, okay, so you never got this weak aura. That's probably why you can't see this thing. So that's very important. Make sure you can track everything that you can see. Good thing is to look at streamers. Some streamers always are. When I stream, people always ask me, "Oh, what is that weak aura that you're tracking? What is that thing showing?" And that's very good because sometimes when you're new to the game, you don't really know what you don't know, and it's really good to just look at other people and see, "Oh, what's that thing? What's that thing?" And I would always look at, for example, if you guys know Megaset, she's a Mistweaver main.
Mhm.
And when I first swapped to Mistweaver, I watched her videos, and I would always look at her weak auras and her UI, and I would see, oh, she has that thing that she needs to track, and okay, I guess I need to look at that as well. When you don't have any idea of what you're doing, you need that kind of guidance, and you just have to look at top streamers. It's really hard to look at logs when you're new because you don't really know what you're looking for. So it's helpful to look at actual people playing and seeing what they're doing. That is how I learned, and that is actually what I provide on my YouTube now. I've been making guides and stuff, like kind of exactly showing people this is what I cast at this time, this is what I look at this time, and I think that will help newer players more. Now that's what I'm trying to do. That's my goal now because I was new and those were kind of things I was looking for. And another important thing is to record your keys. When I started playing, I recorded every single key I did because sometimes I would think, okay, I didn't see this thing, this didn't happen, and then I would rewatch it, and it turns out when I was playing, I didn't see it. But then after rewatching, I noticed something different that I didn't really pay attention to while I was playing. So watching yourself play is more like you're just backseating yourself. So you might notice you think that you have noticed everything, but you really didn't, because I can tell you now when I started watching myself play, I quickly noticed how many things I was not paying attention to when I was playing. So yeah, those are very important things to look at while you're trying to improve.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
it's so
great
true. We
advice.
give that advice all the time, and it's you know, it's such good advice, and I think it shows in your results. I think, you know, looking at your short tenure in retail and the accomplishments you achieved, and then to be like, oh yeah, I got CE, but it was kind of like late, so I just jumped into Hall of Fame like rating. Like it just like, but there's a mentality behind your approach, and you're doing the work, which opens those doors for you. And you know, it's we're always trying to tell people, like, you need to put in the work. You need to study, understand the dungeon. Yeah, I use Warcraft Recorder. I don't know if you guys tried that or use it, but it's great for. I don't have to like have OBS, or like it'll just snap every single PvP arena or key or raid. And then it also has a really cool timeline for like death logs and stuff. It's super cool. I love it. And I can go back and look at why somebody died, why did I die? Was I using defensives? Were they like it's just so useful, and it gives you so many tools. And um but going back to it, you know, your perspective on how you're approaching things is super aggressive. So I want to ask you two things. I'll ask you the first one, and then I have a follow-up question. The first one is, how are you how are you accomplishing, like, okay, you got CE, you weren't necessarily super excited about the timing of that CE and how long it took, so you just jumped into Hall of Fame. How did you approach that, and how did you get to that point?
Oh, okay. So first of all, I gotta explain my rating experience because that's like a different topic. So for people who don't really know me, I was mainly just doing Mythic Plus when I first started playing the game. So Dragonflight Season 3 and 4, I didn't really raid at all except for pugging, just for trinkets that I needed for M+. How I met my team, or my guild, that's probably like something people want to know, because getting into your first CE guild is probably the hardest thing. Getting your first CE is definitely harder than the rest of them. So I got into my guild from playing with a team in Mythic Plus, getting title with that group. And I met that team from pugging. So it all came full circle after we got title. They said, okay, if you got title, that means you're probably good enough to Mythic raid. And they were recruiting a healer at the time for the War Within. That's how I got into that guild. So my goals are mainly Mythic Plus. I want gear for Mythic Plus, and that is why I raided. However, I quickly learned that this is no different from Classic. Healers do not get first prio on gear. So, basically, at that point, if you're getting CE like 5 months into the season, you're probably not going for gear at that point. You're just going for CE. You have to extend lockouts for months to prog bosses, so you're not getting your weekly mythic vaults. You're just only extending and you're only progging that boss for that month. So, I quickly learned that that does not align with my goals, which is to get gear for Mythic Plus. On the opposite effect happened, where I just felt like I was raiding for like 2 days a week, and that was taking time away from Mythic Plus, and I was not really getting anything out of it. So it was cool to try Mythic raiding so that I would have that experience and I would know what it's like. Because I have talked to some veteran pro players, and they told me in order to be truly good at World of Warcraft, you have to also raid. And not just on like a regular CE level, but you have to be good at both raiding and M+ to truly understand the game. I still don't really understand that aspect of it because this is my first season getting into Hall of Fame rating. I am hoping that this will be a better fit for me, because the idea of Hall of Fame rating is you spend more time early in the season to prog those bosses so that you can kill them faster. If you get CE like a month or two into the season, at that point you are raiding for gear, because you kill the last boss, and then after that all you're doing is re-clearing. So you're getting your vaults, you're getting your vault slots, and that does align with what I am trying to do. And that is also the reason why I liked raiding in Classic, because when I used to raid in Classic, we would PTR and we would do server first races, and I really liked the early prog when we had like very low gear and actually doing the fights like without the help of gear, but actually just doing mechanics. And I feel that Hall of Fame rating is kind of similar to that, where it's just early season and you're just focused on the prog and you're grinding at it. I really don't like to stop and pause until the next week, and that's what I felt like in the old guild I was in, and we were just raiding 2 days a week, and if we got the boss to like 5%, then we would be like, okay, well, see you next week. And I didn't really like that. I just wanted to
Like, it's right there.
yeah, it's right there. And there would always be people that would say, I want to do one more pull. Come on, one more pull. And then there would always be other people that were like, nope, I gotta go to bed. Sorry, see you next week. And yeah, so that is what I did not like about previous. Just like getting CE 5 months in. I know that if you like rating and that is your goal to get CE, that is actually a really good start for you. Like if you're joining a guild that gets like CE maybe like a week before season ends or whatever, that is a good start. And that was a good start for me, because if I didn't get CE in that previous guild, I wouldn't have gone into the guild I'm in currently.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And then my follow-up question, and I think you touched on it a bit, but it's not going to go in the direction you're probably thinking.
Okay.
But because my shirt, my shirt says, I don't know if you can see it, but war mode always on is my mentality. So my question is, coming from League of Legends, which is very PvP focused, and Wolvy's grinning because he already knows where I'm going. You're like climbing these ranks in tremendous speeds. So I'm curious to know, are you interested in PvP? Have you dabbled in it? And is it something that you could see yourself at some point kind of blasting through and trying to accomplish or conquer?
That is a good question. So I've always said, yeah, eventually I will try PvP, whatever. So I think currently, I still have a lot of stuff to do in PvE. How my thought process works is, whenever I reach a goal, I try to set a new one. So my first season was, I'm going to focus on Mythic Plus, and I'm going to get title, and that was my goal. And then the second season was, I wanted to get title again on a different character and to see if I can re-roll really quick and get good at that class. And then that was accomplished. Third season, I wanted to get CE, and I wanted to get multiple roles title, and just like become good at the game. My priest actually ended NA 12th of the season, so it was way higher than title. It was like 200 points above title, 36 something. And I just always set myself a new goal every time so that I can keep getting better. And what I like about retail is that because I started playing so late, there are so many goals that I still have not achieved. So every time I achieve something, I can move the goalpost, and there will always be something more to achieve. So my answer to you is, yeah, I want to try PvP eventually, but that's going to be a future goal. So when I keep moving the goalposts, like if I accomplish more and more in PvE, whatever, eventually I'm going to move to that point where I'm like, okay, now it's time to try PvP. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And
let
I
me
think,
ask you, what
you
is
know,
the
you,
current goal though?
oh, yeah.
Because you said, okay, I'm 12th in the NA, I got CE. So what is the goal for this season? Because from what I'm hearing, PvP is the only thing left on your list, basically.
DPS for sure. She wants that
Oh,
DPS
okay,
title, she
DPS. All right,
said.
right.
DPS title. I also want to get off meta title, because people always tell me, "Oh yeah, you're just meta slave, whatever. You can just get title really easily if you just play meta," which is not true, by the way. A lot of people play meta and they can't get title because of different reasons, not because of playing meta or whatever. There's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe they can't play enough, or they can't spend enough time, or they can't find the group. But there's a lot of reasons for that. But I want to be like more established in like the WoW scene. So one thing I didn't talk about yet is last season I met a lot more friends. So my first season playing in Dragonflight Season 3, I met that one group of friends that I got title with, and we just basically kept playing the next season, and then I joined their guild in the War Within Season 1 for CE. But that was all I knew. Like, I only knew that group of friends, and I didn't really grow as much anymore because I didn't meet new people that were better than me. That is really important. This season, or last season, in Season 1, I met way more friends, partly because I started making videos and streaming. People started noticing me from Twitter or whatever platform, and I met Quasi, who's a very well-known WoW content creator. I started playing with him and Rain, who's his healer, and I was playing AUG at the time. So because I played AUG, I got that opportunity to meet them and play with them. So that's another reason why I like playing different roles. And then I met Pika, who's also a tank main. He's also very well known in the community. I met Yoda, and I met Drogo, I'm in his guild currently. But all these TGP and MDI players. But I just want to be more established in the WoW community, because I think it's very awesome to be able to play with whoever you want and just be friends with everyone. And in order to do that, I need to be good myself. So I want to get to a point where I am good enough to be on that level. Maybe not like a professional, but I think a couple of my friends competed in TGP last season, and I probably would have if I had a group going into that at the time. I had like a period of time where I didn't have a group. And then that's the reason why we couldn't. We were trying to go into TGP, and then like a couple people like dropped out, and by the time we found a new group to play with, the signups closed. But competing in TGP would be cool if I ever have a team to do it with, and then just overall be more established in the raiding scene, because right now I still feel like I'm very new to raiding, and there's way more to see in raiding, in my opinion, so far, because I've already played M+ for 3 seasons, and raiding, I've only gotten CE that one time, and that's all I know. And people are telling me Hall of Fame raiding is way different, so I want to see what happens this season and going on. And then climbing the ranks of raiding is very difficult. So going from like one guild to a better one, you have to either have really good logs, or you have to know people that are that can vouch for you. And it's just, that's a whole other process that I still feel like I'm new to. And then yeah, in general, just being good at the game. And Drogo, who's my GM currently and a friend, he is good at everything he plays. He played a healer in TGP in Dragonflight Season 4, and then last season he was like almost 3,800 as prop paladin, and this season, like every time I play with him and he can play whatever role, he just does damage on it. So I want to get to that point where I'm just very good at everything I play, and I still feel like I'm very far off from that. I'm barely just conquering like all the healer classes right now, and then kind of getting into tanking. But like I said earlier, I just want to be like a good player like that and be respected by everyone.
Yeah. We're definitely going the right way. I mean, we're healers. We obviously think healing is the most difficult thing in the game, and
Yeah.
next to tanking, I think tanking last season was probably the biggest challenge. And obviously it showed with just the lack of tanks and the amount of pressure that it goes into tanking as far as like being able to brick keys. I think healers right there with them. I think this season now it's actually probably shifting a little bit, while there's still not a ton of tanks. Talking about the pug community, right? There's still not a ton of tanks that are just like out there like plethora, even with the
Oh
damage
yeah,
increases.
even
until
in the
they're-
pre-made community, like even in the
it's
pre-made
less, right?
community, there
Yeah.
were not that many tanks last season.
Yeah, it's insane. But I think from going back to where I was at, the challenge of like, I don't think you're probably that far. I mean, just looking at your accomplishments, it's more of a mentality. I mean, when you switch from the different healers, I mean, come on, we all three of us play every single healer, right? So it's like you get your kicks, you know what bind those go on, you know your 2-minute, your 3-minute cooldowns, right? You have to understand the damage patterns, and obviously playing disc, you play like you have to pay attention, you have to know damage is coming, right? Whereas something like a holy priest or some of the other ones you can kind of react. But the mentality is already there. And then even in the sense of like Mythic Plus and the rating, even Hall of Fame rating. I never technically got Hall of Fame. I rated in some really high end raid guilds that are like top 200 world, so would be considered Hall of Fame. But I didn't finish that tier. It's just the only difference really is the frequency and the number of hours that you play in the beginning of the season, and just get gold towards the middle and end of the season. That's the only really big difference. Maybe if you like grind, so I don't see you having a big challenge for Hall of Fame rating, because you like, the only challenge you'll probably
Thank
have
you.
is balancing Mythic Plus time with raid time in preparation, right? That's the only the struggle you're gonna have is that. So and I would say like getting to the top, and I'm sorry, but I have to say it, PvP is the most difficult content in the game, especially when you're pushing high threes. I mean, TGP I think is big, right? And MDI I think is huge because those are very specific competitive, and I think there's pressure in those. But in general, more casual, just day-to-day gameplay, I think there's no there's no like set. There is in PvP, there is a cadence that happens. It's just way different and way faster, and there's a lot of variance and forcing people to make mistakes. Whereas in PvE, it's like they're robots, right? They do the same exact thing every single time. So kind of getting to that level in PvP will ultimately kind of, I think it requires a little bit more nuance and understanding the different characters in the game. But anyways, I'm looking forward to that. I know you'll get to that point, and I'm excited to kind of see how your PvP journey plays out as
No, I
you've done
appreciate it.
amazing so far in keys and ratings. So I'm excited
Yeah, and I'll
for
be
you.
more excited to see your team in the TGP. I'll be rooting for you guys. And if we can help with something, check out the links below. You can find the YouTube channel, the Twitch channel for Katsa, and everything else that you need to connect with her and see the content that she's making. So let's jump a little bit forward to the current week, the current season, because we just got season 2 starting up. And I'll just ask you first to go around the table and say what was your experience for the start of season 2.
All right. So basically, we had a goal. I joined this guild like a couple weeks ago before the season started, and we had a guild meeting and we had a goal of raiding 4 days a week, 4 hours a day for the first 3 weeks, and then trying to prog as much as we can in our guild. So basically, I have been raiding for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 4 hours a day. And I just haven't really done as many keys as I wanted to, which is what you guys mentioned earlier, kind of hard to juggle between rating and M+. So I actually have a new thought about that, because I was always scared of rating because I didn't want to take time away from M+. However, after the season that just passed, I have a new perspective about that. Because first of all, pretty much everything I did start of last season didn't really matter, because after the 0.5 patch, the meta shifted and everything was different, everything changed and everything. So now I'm not that worried about pushing early season anymore. So I think it's actually good that I'm doing all this raiding and everything now, because then my character will get more geared faster. And then I can just get this raiding stuff out of the way. And then after we get CE or whatever, assuming everything goes right, obviously, then I can focus more on pushing keys. Obviously, I had a different mentality before, because IO mattered to you if you were mainly pugging. Because if you're behind on IO ever, you just stop getting into groups. So that's why my idea was different back then. But now that I kind of have a group to play with, everything changed. So IO doesn't really matter right now. I've just been gearing as many characters as I can. I've gotten my vault fully filled on 10s for my main. And then for my second and third character, I have 110 on them, and I've hit 2K on them as well. And today, after the podcast, I'm gonna go grind again and then work on my fourth and fifth characters. And I'm gonna try to get as many characters as I can filled on the weekly vault and 2K, just so I can have that foundation built for the rest of the season. And whatever happens later, I can just easily transition. Or if I want to play a different role, which I probably will, because I always play different roles and stuff. I don't want to start from the beginning again. I know that this season they're going to change it so that you have that Boolean system back again, so that gearing will be way easier later. So it's not as important this season, but at least I want to have that foundation built, so I feel good about playing keys for the rest of the season. So yeah, this week has just been a lot of. We did 3 splits in our main raid. We did 3 normal 8 out of 8 splits, and then 5 out of 8 heroic. And then Monday we're going back in, and we're gonna do 6 out of 8 in 2 splits, and then combine our raid, because AOTC this week is actually really hard. The season there's only been a couple guilds in the world that have gone AOTC so far, so that's gonna be really hard. But going into Monday, I think we're in a better spot because we did all these splits, and the majority of our DPS have 4-piece by Monday. So all you needed to do this week was basically get 2 pieces up from raid, and then 2 catalyst charges from getting 2K and the default one. So going into Monday, I'm hoping that we're going to be strong enough to combine our raid and get AOTC, and then maybe the first 2 mythic bosses. That is our plan from our guild. And then for me personally, on top of that, I'm doing all this M plus stuff that I just talked about. So past 2 days, I've just been grinding at keys because I kind of missed out a little bit on it when I was still raiding early in the week. But I kind of don't feel really bad about that because I still feel like I'm very ahead. I have like 3 characters that are filling vaults and stuff, and as long as I'm reaching my weekly goals, which is very important, you need to set goals that are like kind of realistic and achievable. You after playing long enough, you probably have like a good idea of like what you can and can't achieve depending on the time that you have and learning from previous experiences. So as long as I have a goal for the week and I reach that goal for the week, I'm always happy.
Yep. One of the things that you touched on, and I'm sure like you didn't mention it, but I have to think it's you know this, but I want to talk about it because it's important for viewers that are trying to accomplish it, especially M plus players that also raid. Even in Hall of Fame, like you talked about splits, it's such a huge advantage because even though your split characters aren't getting gear, they're still getting vaults, right? Which is huge. In addition to like the 10s that you're running or the 110, right? The heroic gear, yeah, it's not going to be mythic, but maybe you just get unlucky in your 10 and it's a piece that you don't really want and or it's really bad for you. At least you have now 3 boxes in your heroic that'll give you something, which is big. Save you a catalyst charge. And then when that 11.5 hits, you're way more caught up with those splits that you probably will maybe end up becoming a main if it's meta or something like that. So there's so many advantages to raid, especially in Hall of Fame because of splits, which is big.
Yep, I agree. And one thing I do want to note though, because people always ask me whether you need to raid in order to like push keys and stuff, you absolutely don't have to raid. My first 2 seasons, I didn't raid and I got title. So a lot of people just hate raiding and they just don't want to go anywhere near that. That's completely fine if your goal is to just like try to even push M plus to title. You don't need to raid. You're just gonna miss out on a couple pieces, but it is definitely more of like a skill kind of game rather than like a gear kind of thing. There are a lot of people who never got like myth trinkets by the end of every season, just because I also don't really like how the vault system works, where you can only get myth trinkets from M plus out of your vaults, and
Yeah.
if you're just unlucky, then you're just doomed. You just can't get that trinket for the rest of the season, and that's actually the reason why I made a second priest. I was going to see which priest gets better vault and then make that my main. That's assuming if priest is going to be meta for the season. So if it ends up not being meta, which is very likely, I think the meta could shift towards rest of druid if the VDH or the shadow priest, and then if they bring Og back in 0.5 in some sort of way, I have a feeling they're going to rework Og and bring it back in 0.5, or if not next season. So the meta could shift. Nobody knows anything right now, which is why like worrying about the meta or trying to do whatever right now it's kind of irrelevant. So I would say if you're trying to get into M plus right now and stay ahead, the more important thing is to get gear over like trying to push early season.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous that you had so much time to play because my experience so far was I was like a day and a half behind because I had a very busy week, work, etc. Right? So I logged in. Everybody's like already pushing tens. I'm just like, hey guys, it's a new patch. What's going on? So I'm like, okay, I have everybody starts at the +2, right? So let me go into that +2. I'm gonna level my key and go play with my guildies. I got this bug in Cinder Brumidery. These guys had no idea what this dungeon is. They had no idea what the mechanics do, etc. So they actually managed to break my +2. I was like, oh my god. Then I went to a bunch of Theater of Pains, which they were high level. They went fine until the end boss, and then the end boss, everybody's eating frontals in the face, so we wipe and we don't time those keys. So that initial experience for me in Mythic Plus was actually very horrible until later in the week when I actually managed to play with my guildies a little bit, and then we started playing into the tens, etc. That felt much better. But I think initially, especially for PUGs and especially right now at lower keys, the dungeon design this season in general for PUGs is a little bit harder than maybe it should be because there's a lot of new mechanics, a lot of mechanics that are not exactly obvious what you need to do, you know, for example, like the second boss
Oh
in the
yeah.
Dark Flame Cleft and so forth, right? And even these guys in Cedar Meter, right? I even explained to the tank on the second boss, you need to kite the ads. He kites the boss through the ads. We die. They didn't know that they have to like mount the beasts on the third boss. All kinds of things like that, right? So I think it's a very rough season for bugs, especially in the beginning. And we come from season one where, like, I don't know how many keys you pug right now, but the whole community vibe, the whole community sentiment was this season is way too hard for pugging. And it seems like season two, the tuning, that's going to be my next question, but the tuning seems to be okay in the beginning, but it's still very pug unfriendly. Would you agree with a statement like that?
Yes. I agree that all the War Within dungeons have been harder for pugs. So for example, last season, Stone Vault first boss was a
Yeah.
big one where healers just did not know when to dispel the tank. My husband actually played last season before he quit, but he was a tank main and he was pugging, and pugs would just not dispel him at the right time. He would just die, and the pugs would just blame him and then leave. So that was his experience. And I feel bad for him and for anyone who pugs because most of the War Within dungeons are not pug friendly. Like if you're trying to learn, I remember when people were really annoyed at the Dawnbreaker at first when they had no idea what was going on. You just fly somewhere, I don't know, just follow someone, and if
Chaos.
you're just
Yeah.
tanking for the first time, you just have no idea where to go. Um, and that's the same for this season. There's a lot of dungeons, like you mentioned, Cinder Meadery. If you don't know what to do, you're just not gonna know. It's not very self-explanatory. Dark Flame Cleft was one I mentioned. Second and third boss. If you don't know what to do, it's very confusing. I did a couple of PTR keys, and I only recently just learned exactly how the mechanics work on these
Yep.
bosses, and I'm playing with. I didn't pug that much. I did pug like a couple keys where I had to like make my own keys, but I was with a friend, so I was never like pugging alone. Um, and I did not pug twos, or I did, but like we had friends that we were with at least, and um, pugging sevens and tens, people kind of already know the mechanics by then, but even when I explained to my friends who haven't played the season yet, they were very confused, and they're very good players too. They got title, and they were like 35 plus, 3500 plus, and they still had no idea anything about the dungeons, and they still didn't know how to do the mechanics, even after I explained it. And I was kind of just like, okay, I guess you're just going to have to see it.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine for like people who are either new to the game or just don't really play M Plus that often, it's going to be a lot to learn. But I would say the best advice is watch videos of people playing and or just do the dungeons. I think that is one reason why I think heroic and like M zeros probably should have been out last week, so that people would
Mhm.
at least like be able to see the dungeons. Because
Yeah.
right now, like the main problem is people are going into these dungeons blind. They have no idea how to do these dungeons because they haven't seen them at all. Like not even on Mythic Zeros. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's really hard right now. But I think the tuning is very helpful.
Yeah.
The minus 10% nerf across all dungeons, it just made everything way easier so that like sometimes if you don't know the mechanic, you can kind of still get through it. And that is going to be like more encouraging to people that are trying to learn, because nobody wants to keep playing if they're just wiping over and over again and just not really understanding what's going on. So at least like if you're able to kind of get through the dungeon without knowing anything, you'll slowly learn.
Let me disagree a little bit there with the heroic statement because I think we did these dungeons last season apart from Floodgate because I don't know if they were like Mythic Zero, but we definitely did them on heroic, right? At the beginning of the War Within. And I remember that we just zerked through them, although like we were undergeared in the beginning of the season, etc. I remember we were doing
Yeah.
Dark Flame Cleft. We just killed all the bosses, you know, including the second boss. And I had no idea how the second boss works. Not until I actually went into the PTR and somebody had to explain to me because before in heroic, maybe even if you like the whole ground gets dark and you get hit, you probably don't die, right? On Mythic Plus, you wipe, right? And this is, as you said, this is not a mechanic that you can actually explain. Like, you have to go in, you have to see the boss, you have to see the candles on the side, that you have to light them up or, you know, put them out, etc. It's not like the regular mechanics. Ooh, there's a swirly on the ground. I'll just, you know, dodge it and I'm not gonna die, right? So I think that goes back to saying how the design is for these dungeons and how hard it is. But you mentioned that you were on the PTR. I will say that everything was very, very overtuned on the PTR, and
Yep.
it looked even worse because not only there are those mechanics with you know this design. I'm not gonna use words for the design, but they're also extremely hard and everything like one shots you and the damage is obnoxious. And I was very scared because I was thinking, okay, if everything is that hard on the PTR, many groups didn't even go past the first or the second boss in many dungeons because it was that hard. So the rest of the dungeons was actually not tested, and I was very scared that the tuning is going to be very off in the beginning of the season. But hopefully I'm wrong, right? So it's still hard for healers. There's still new mechanics. People are still learning dungeons, but and they also are undergeared. We're all undergeared right now. But even at this point, I think it's bearable and it's only going to get better. So don't doom the season, guys, even if it feels a little bit harder right now. And I'll just add one more thing. You said that you played with a group. That's definitely easier. Like, as I said, I had a nightmare in the beginning of the week, but after I started playing with my friends, it was much better. But even in the beginning of the week, I managed to get into a group which played very well in one dungeon. Like, they were a group of friends, obviously, and they were carrying their druid friend who was a DPS. But because we did the dungeon fine, they were like, hey, you want to stay for the next one? I was like, yeah, cool. And then we went all the way up to doing like a couple of tents with them. So I guess that's the advice. You're gonna get into some bad pugs, which are gonna break your keys. But if you see some people that you like and you think you can play more keys with them, then just ask and keep going, because it's not that easy to find good quality people and you know push keys as high as you can for that first week, because gears is all that matters in the beginning, as Katsa also said.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything to add on the M plus side? Because I want to ask some questions about the raid as well.
Okay. Just to add to what you just said, yeah, I think I also agree. Like, if you've been smashing through heroics, whatever, you don't really understand the mechanics. But I still think, like, at least you get to see the dungeon like a little bit,
Yeah.
and like some parts of it, some of it still helps. Like, there are some mechanics that you won't see in like lower keys or whatever. But I think if you're like completely new, I the reason why I have this opinion is because I know some people, I've seen some people in M0s that were like still kind of struggling, like people that were actually very new to the game. And I think that is still like a better alternative than jumping straight into twos. So, and people always like to rush themselves.
Yeah.
Another thing is, like, if you somehow accidentally 3-chest a 2 in a really good group, and then you're just going to send the 5. You're just gonna run the 5. So I think forcing people to like take their time to learn dungeons is still a good thing, even if they don't learn like all the mechanics at once. But being thrown and plus at them straight is still like probably not a good thing for pugs. And then to add to your comment about having friends, the strategy I used was to make friends from the previous season. So when I came in, I made friends, and then afterwards, I don't think I have had a season where I haven't had friends to play with after my first season. Because ever since my first season, I've always just like added friends that I like playing with, and slowly just built up like a friends list of people that I can kind of trust and play with. So at the start of season, I'm not just like, oh no, I'm alone. I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna try to queue in the keys and hope it works out. And I would say that like making friends is probably, if not just as important as being good at the game. So I'm saying that because you can be a really good player, but you just can't climb if you're not playing with people, if you're not playing with a full group. And everyone has to start somewhere. Everyone starts pugging. and eventually meet friends and stuff. I actually watched an interview of how Ellesmere got to where he is, and he also said that he added a tank to begin with, and then they slowly found DPS to play with, and he was also pugging at one point, and eventually got there to where like he finally had friends to play with. So on both ends, it's you have to work really hard to improve your skill level, but you also have to work really hard to network and try to find friends to play with. So when people say like I have friends to play with, it's not just like, oh, you got lucky and you have friends to play with. It's you also had to like do something to get there. People aren't just going to reach out to you. Like you just can't sit there and wait for people. You have to go and initiate, which is also hard for a lot of people because I understand like people have social anxiety and a lot of people who play this game are introverts and they don't want to do all that stuff. But unfortunately, how the system is right now, there is no like solo queue like in League where you can just queue into a match and the system will find the match for you. Unfortunately, the LFG system, you just that's just what you have to do.
Yeah, and having friends.
I want to
definitely
touch on
helps.
the M0 part too, because I agree. I think that the first week of 11.1 was weird because it was like there was nothing to do. You did like an hour of quests,
Yeah.
45 minutes of quests, and then it was like, okay, no PvP rated, no Mythic Plus, no raid. It was like, what was the point? I think zeros would have been amazing because a lot of people have alts, and maybe some of those alts weren't geared. And I think it would have been a nice preface to what was coming in a way that's not heroic, that some of the mechanics would have mattered and it would have kind of forced people to go into season 2 with a little bit more knowledge than blasting through the heroics, which you didn't do mechanics. I think Mythic 0 is easier, right? It's supposed to be like a 10, right? Back in like, you think about Dragonflight era,
Yeah.
before they did the squish. And I think it would have been a good warm up. It still was limiting, right? Once a week or something, or I don't know. They've changed it like once a day now. If they would have just moved it to once a week, I think it would have been fine for like avoiding like the gear grind thing. Um, but I don't know why they choose, because it was a weird week, honestly, from my perspective.
Yeah, I don't think anyone enjoyed that week, and I'll kind of agree with you because I think we had the season. Was it beginning of Dragonfly, beginning of the War Within, or one of the Dragonflight seasons? But they had this week where you could do Mythic Zeros, but they were on a daily
Yeah.
lockout, and that felt like a lot of pressure because there were like 8 dungeons, so you have to do 8 dungeons on your main, maybe some on ults, and then the day rolls
Yeah.
over, and oh god, I have to start again, and all of that is for gear that is obviously it was going to be an upgrade back then for what you got, but it was a
Mhm.
small upgrade. And then the first week where actual Mythic Plus rolls out, you're basically replacing this gear straight away. So I think that was not a
Yeah.
good experience, but if it's like a weekly lockout, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense because everybody would see the dungeons into like an easier environment, because I think Mythic Zeros are not timed, right? There's no timer, so you can go, try to kill the bosses, see the dungeon, get a general idea of what's going on, and yeah, maybe they could have at least done that, so that
Yeah.
people had something to do in that first week, which was pretty dead.
Yeah. So weird. It was a dead week.
Yeah.
So bizarre.
Yeah, and I have a lot of alts that were like under 600 item level. Some other friends had alts that were under 600 item level, and it was just kind of weird where you couldn't really get crests or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you can't
Weird.
really spend your valor stones. And if
Yeah.
if you're like doing the old keys, you can't even upgrade your gear.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, it
weird.
was kind of weird.
Yeah, the gear
They
was
broke
also
it. They
golden.
posted too, saying they were gonna reconsider how they approached that first week. Hopefully they do. I will say I have a different experience than both of you for the first week. So I've been maining Druid, wrestler Druid, this expansion. I have other healers, but I'm pretty much locked in on Druid and Warlock at this point. I'm raiding. I have 3 teams that I in my guild that I GM of, and the teams are doing some of the teams are doing splits and stuff. So I'm helping most of those teams as well because they raid on different times. Having all these people at my disposal, I still pug my keys for the most part. I don't know why. I just like to. I like the challenge. Also, I'm social and I like to reach out and meet people, and I also use it as a form of recruiting.
And you like to suffer.
And yeah, and I suffer, and it is painful sometimes. And I will be. I had multiple keys this week where there was like 2 giga chats and they were carrying a friend, and the friend would die on every mechanic. And so basically, we four-man most of the keys. We're still timing them, right? But it's so funny because you have to go in the pug world. You have to like you can't go from like 2 to 5 to 8, right? It's like people won't invite you unless you're doing your own key, and at that point, yeah, you can do it. But even then, sometimes the queues could be weird. And the only reason I think people joined my key is because they can see last year I got like, or last season I got 3,200. So like, okay, this guy kind of knows what he's doing, so we can join it. But but right now I'm like working through the 8s and I'm almost done, and then I'll go through the 9s. Could I do 10s with guildies? I have a few people in the guild that are doing 10s already. I could easily just jump in and say, guys, bring the GM to the keys. I want to heal it, But I don't know. There's some weird thing where I just enjoy pugging for some reason. But it's been fun. It's been fun to like, not rage out about it. I'm not in an omega rush to like, like it's fun to gear. I like that process. I like playing alts, but I'm just enjoying the game and having the experience of like, the pug life. I enjoy it. It gives me perspective.
Oh yeah,
And it makes me use my full my full toolkit for sure as a resto druid.
I do want to add to that because when I first started, so my first season, I was pretty much pugging all the way to almost title. And I will say that the main difference between pugging and playing in a group is the style that you're healing. So pugging is more like reactive. I always tell people when I pug, I can't communicate when people are using cooldowns. So I just track their cooldowns, and if they use a defensive, I'm not going to use my big ability until I see that everyone's out of defensives, or if we like somehow type in chat like I'm going to use Zephyr first, and then I know okay he's going to use this ability first. But outside of that like limited communication, you don't really know when people are going to use things. And so I still think it is very good to pug. And that is how I got a lot better at healing, because you don't really get to practice that aspect when you're playing with a group all the time. So even when I do have a group to play with, I always try to pug outside of that and just kind of refine my skills more on like the reactive side, because when you're playing with a group, sometimes you still have like oopsies happen and emergencies, and you have to be able to either recover or, I mean, you wipe or the keys breaks. So the better you are at like reacting and kind of trying to recover from an emergency, the more likely you will be to time keys that sometimes even something wrong happens. And I think the best way to learn and practice that kind of reactive healing is through pugging. So I still think you should definitely pug, even if you have a team to play with.
Yeah, I want to add to that too, because you're saying it without saying it directly, and there's some people that aren't going to catch what you're saying, and I know it, but I love the mentality, and so it's this. even in a structured group, in the pug community, there's this mentality that when a key wipes, it's somebody else's fault, right? And that's not what you're saying. You're actually saying you like to pug because other people make mistakes, and instead of just saying this player made a mistake, you're like, I want to be able to accommodate their mistake. What can I do better as an individual so that when other people make mistakes, I can help them and assist them, instead of just saying, well, it's their fault. They didn't use the defensive, or they didn't move out of the mechanic, or they didn't whatever. You're like, how can I help this person? And that mentality is what separates the limiting factors in like being able to excel as a player. Because when you blame other people, you're just not putting yourself in position to be a better player. Instead of looking at it like, how can I support this team? Even a mage. I love when I have a mage that is paying attention in a key, and they bring mass barrier or whatever the mage thing is where it shields everybody, and there's a big AoE event happens and they push it a second before, and I'm like, oh, thank God, mage. Thank you so much, because now I don't have to blow one of my cooldowns to keep everybody alive. So yeah, I mean, and that's that mentality of like, what can I do to support the team, instead of like, oh, the tank didn't use the defensive, the healer didn't pop this, like it's such a good mentality. And to hear you say that is, yeah, I think that's good for everybody to understand. Like, take more personal accountability. What can you do to be better as an individual to help the whole team? It'll take you a long way.
Yeah, and to add to that, I always get like comments on my stream saying, "Oh, how come you're healing like 2 million HPS and you're doing a 10, and then I'm trying to heal like 1.5 mil and I can't heal like a 2, or like something ridiculous like that." And I don't really like to look at it that way. So that has happened to me before, where I had to heal way more than like some of the people I play with, and we time the same keys. And the way I look at healing is the better your group is, the less you have to do. You're basically like a I don't want to compare it to like a trash collector, but basically like if people are littering, you got to pick up the trash.
Yep.
And basically the worse the group is, the more you have to heal. So I don't really like to look at it in a way where like I'm blaming my group, like you said, right? You don't want to be like, oh, that he's just didn't pop his defensives, and yeah, that's it. Like it's not my fault. Because first of all, if you have to heal like this much more in order to time that same level key, then that means you will be able to time a higher key. Like I see it that way. Whenever I get a good group, I will be able to heal that key level instead of thinking about like, oh, I can't believe like I have to heal this much, I have to do this much work. um
Yeah.
I always like to see it as like, okay, so if I can do this in this group, then imagine if I like get into a better group, because eventually like if you're pugging, you're going to get into a good group eventually at some point. And then the reason why I'm saying this is because my first season playing, I had that like kind of pug mentality and stuff, and I wouldn't blame people, but whenever it was my fault, I felt really bad because I would feel like I wouldn't get this opportunity again. So there was this Everbloom 28 that I was healing, and Everbloom was like the hardest key of that season. And then on the last boss, everything was going well. We were going to time the key, and I just like accidentally rolled off the cliff while I was trying to like clear one of the flowers. And then we broke that key, and I still remember that key because I was really upset that it was my fault, and the group didn't even blame me at all. They were just like laughing about it. But at the time, I was like, I'm never gonna time this key again because I finally got a good group that I was playing with, and I just like messed it up. So first of all, I did time that key by the end of the season, so I wasn't mad about that anymore. But that's the reason why I want to try to be as good as possible, so that like when I do get an opportunity like that, I don't mess it up. And that's very important because when you're pugging, you just don't get as many opportunities. So you want to make sure you are playing 100%, as close to 100% as possible. So first of all, like I can make an analogy. Like in League, when I played League, most of the games are probably like just 50-50. Like 50% of the games are just you get a good team or you don't get a good team. And it's that like 25 and 25 where like you get a good team versus a bad team, that is where you climb. That is where like you determine the game. You get those like 25% of games where you can take your win rate up to 60% if you're good, or 40% if you're not good. But most of it is going to be like 50-50. So I applied that same kind of experience to Mythic Plus, where the probably like more than half the pugs you get are probably going to be like whatever, and then you're going to be get that like 20% of pugs that where they're actually good, and then that is where your performance matters, and you don't want to be the one to mess up when you get a good group like that.
Yeah, I would say it has to be the opposite because today we were running Mechagon 10 with the guildies, and people just like they kept dying on the beams on the third boss. They kept like one of the guys I think jumped off from the last boss, and we didn't time the key. Like we bricked it, we still got it for the vote, but I didn't do anything stupid in that key. So at the end, I was standing there. Everybody was said, "Oh, we bricked the key." I was like, you know what, guys? I played perfect. So
Funny.
I don't care, I didn't make any mistakes. And they were like, yeah, I played so dumb. That dead, that cost us the key. I was like, I didn't die, so it's your fault. So yeah, that I'm just going back,
Your
from
fault.
yeah, no, I
Mm.
didn't said that, it's just it wasn't my fault. Like I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
I didn't blame them, but I was just sitting there listening to them. I was like, I'm innocent, so yeah, I was just trying to say that going back to what you were saying. You try to be playing the best as you can and be the best, and then if the key ends and you didn't make any mistakes, even if the key's bricked, you're gonna feel good. I'm not saying go blame people. Like, don't get me wrong. I didn't say
Oh
anything to
yeah.
them. Just the feeling that I got was like, it's fine. It wasn't my fault. So I did what I could, the best that I could do it. All right. So speaking about mistakes that are very costly, let's go to a place where mistakes can cause the lives of 20 people altogether, or even more if it's heroic. So the raid started. There's a lot going on. Obviously, the race to world first is going on right now. Um, Starting backwards though, I think normal difficulty in the raid was a complete joke. Like the bosses, like I guess they had mechanics, but it kind of felt like what we said earlier, those heroic dungeons. Just go in and they fall over. Like they see you and like, we give up. Here's the loot. So we
Yeah.
even one shotted Gallywix, I think, on normal. So it was basically a walk in the park. And then you go into heroic, and things ramp up. Like I think Styx Bunk Junker has like double the health or something. It was a huge difference, from going to normal to heroic. And then seeing that, all right, obviously we're not going to get AOTC in the first week, but even watching the Raced World first, right now they're stuck on the fourth boss, right? They're doing like
Yeah.
60 plus
Yep.
pulls, 70 plus pulls on the fourth boss. So we said that the tuning for M plus is good, but what about the tuning in the raid? Because it seems it's very weird, and also it seems that it might be going back to last raid was considered to be very hard because the last four bosses were extremely difficult. Now people are stuck even on the fourth boss, and those are like the best players in the world. What is your perspective, and do you think that we are up? Because obviously the difficulty is going to spike up after the fourth boss, right? It's not going to get easier. Do you think that this raid might be actually even harder than the previous one?
Yeah, definitely. So, from my example, last season we got AOTC week 1. We only did normal splits, nothing really else. I know that there was like heroic week and M zeros before, but it was still like relatively easier and like not nearly as hard. And at the time you could consider so that like tier token they can get from either getting 2K or AOTC, you could actually just choose either one at the
Yeah.
time. But now it's more like, yeah, you're going for 2K. You're not gonna go for AOTC for that tier token. My guild is completely going for 2K on everyone, so that we can get AOTC in in raid. So it is definitely way harder. A couple guilds that I know from friends, they normally get AOTC every season on week 1, and this season they are probably stuck at like 5 or 6 out of 8. It's just really rough. So, and from what I've seen, I think Liquid just got their AOTC like 2 days later, which is
Oh yeah, it was very
like
late.
that is like yeah, that was very late. And they also had to cut splits, and they had to cut helpers. Or I don't know if they cut splits, but they definitely cut helpers.
Yeah,
And normally they
I
can get
think the
AOTC with
LTC.
helpers.
I think the LTC was with no helpers at all. It was they combined all the splits up there, and then whatever they picked as mains, those were the guys that went to Galawix.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, so definitely way more difficult. However, I do like the scaling this time. Not like the tuning, but the scaling from like each boss gets harder and harder versus last season the first 4 were like a stomp, and then the fifth one it just suddenly gets hard. I like the scaling of how like each boss gets harder and harder, but I definitely think the tuning is a bit much. And compared to keys right now, I think that is like one of the reasons why. I don't know if they're trying to get people to do more keys, but it's definitely working. Like a lot of people are doing way more keys now. Even the guild that I used to raid with, a lot of people didn't really do that many keys in that guild, and now they're doing keys. So I don't know if that was the goal or anything, but yeah, I think the raid is on heroic is definitely like way too difficult. I don't know if that'll affect people that are more casual people that are trying to raid.
Oh, it will. And also, let me add to this. Even if there are more keys being done, I think those people are kind of like forced to go and do the Mythic Plus because they need the gear to kill the bosses, and maybe they need like some trinkets or something from the Mythic Plus dungeons. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they enjoy the Mythic Plus and they want to do it. So even if the numbers are, let's say, inflated a little bit, I'm personally, I'm not sure that's a good thing, because in the long term, that's definitely not going to be healthy for the game, of people complaining that they're forced to do a Mythic Plus just because they couldn't kill a heroic Mythic or Mythic boss eventually.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I have no idea how it's gonna go, but I don't really know like too much about rating. But from what I've heard before, it's mostly based on Race to World First. Like things get nerfed based on Race to World First.
Yeah.
So like last season, Prez Evoker was really good, and that one was kind of weird because Race to World First, they ran like 2, 3 Prez Evokers or whatever, and they were able to kill mythic bosses because of that.
Yep.
And then after the race was over, they nerfed Prez Evokers, which was bad for like a guild like us, because we basically like couldn't get the benefits of like having a Prez Evoker for it. Not that we had any, so we had 2 Restless Shamans. But if we wanted to, we didn't get that help that we would probably need, because if Race to the World First needed like that much help to get it, then we would probably need that much help. Even if the raid got nerfed after, like it's still harder for like people that aren't at that pro level. And then we also have like a harder time because classes got nerfed. Like Fury Warrior got nerfed last season, and it was pumping a lot at the start. And then same with this season, they're probably going to nerf classes after Race to the World First, and then whoever else that needs to get CE suddenly have it harder. So
Yep.
I don't know if they're going to do any tuning for the raid itself, but I'm hoping they do, because otherwise, like this is gonna be like a long prog tier for everyone.
Yeah, and I think 2 things. I think for sure they're going to tweak. I mean, even hearing Max complain about like why are we making the front bosses so hard, and it's just funny because I mean I kind of like that they're they're challenged a little bit more instead of it being done in a week and a day. Basically, it's like first reset and then they're done. I remember going back a while. It was a couple other ones. Well, remember that 3-headed dragon or like a monster that had the little blood pools in like these little rooms. Well, you might remember that. This was probably before Katsa's time, but and I remember there was a big DPS check there, and it was like impossible to kill it. Like so they did the same thing. Everybody broke off, was doing keys because, or they just did something else. Maybe they're doing, or I don't remember, but they just stopped progging because it was impossible to kill. They did the math and it was like whatever. And then the Blizzard does come back and they'll adjust it. I think that so this I expect the same thing. The other thing I expect is like you're saying, like with the Prez example. One of the things Blizzard tries to do, and it's annoying to me, is they want to balance everything perfectly. Okay, for example, Void Weaver is way too much representation. Oracle doesn't for disc, so we're gonna nerf Void Weaver and we're gonna buff Oracle or whatever. As an example, like they want to see their class specs get represented like evenly, and that's just sometimes it's not fun. It's like fun to see a certain class like blast off for an expansion or not expansion, maybe like a tier or whatever. But they always try to nerf things, and it's just like, why? Just let it be. I mean, if it's broken to where it's like raids only want to bring 4 Prez Evokers, and that's probably an issue. But in the case where something's excelling a little bit more than others, it's like let people have their time. Let the meta chasers do that. I'm one of those. I'll switch based on the meta. I'm a meta slave. but other players, sometimes that's the only thing they play. It's like let them shine for a tier. Why not? Instead of like nerfing, or just bring other healers up or other DPS up or other tanks up, instead of like, okay, we're gonna nerf these and then we're gonna buff these. It's like just bring it up or something, like, but don't take the fun out of the game. Let it be fun.
Yep. Another thing is like when they nerf things from raid, it also affects M plus a lot of the time. So
And PvP get better about that.
yeah, and they nerfed like I think they did something to like Holy Paladin back then, and it was already kind of dead in keys. So like it just made it even worse. Right now it's just they got like a 4% overall healing buff, but it's not nearly enough. And I don't know what they're going to do about that, but I think they could do something where they tune it based on the like if they're gonna buff it for keys, they can just say out of raids they have this buff or whatever. And
Yeah.
I think that would work way better because right now, like whenever they nerf something or whatever, it just affects keys.
They did that for PvP. By the way, Katsa, you just made Wolvie cry a little bit inside when you referenced the Holy Pally in Dragonflight. He cried a little bit on the inside. I'll let you know.
I'm done
I feel for
crying.
holy values.
I'm done crying for the Holopout, and I just gave up on it. I lost hope. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, even
Well, yeah, they've
Elsevier
done
lost
that with
hope.
PvP. I
Oh,
think all three of us tried to
Yeah.
talk.
yeah,
They've done that with PvP, like what you're talking about, and I think they should do that for raids too. Like there's PvP specs, which is cool, like a little section for 3 different abilities that you can just use in PvP. And then when they do balancing, and you guys probably both, obviously you both know this, like it'll say PvP only, or this only affects PvP. So I don't know why they don't do that for raids or Mythic Plus. Like they should do that. So certain abilities that play well, that are buffed in 5-man content, right? So that's obviously to speak to keys. um so they should do more of that. I think it'll go a long way with kind of keeping those different silos of gameplay kind of healthy, instead of like trying to again homogenize and just make the general class something. And that was really big back in the old, vanilla BC Wrath days, where it was like if they made a change to a class, it didn't matter for raid or dungeons. It was just for raid mainly, and it sucked for PvP. It was unfortunate.
yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's
And the
gonna
reason,
fix. Go ahead.
okay, it's just something small. The reason why I want to mention that was because I have some Fury Warrior friends last season and they got nerfed in raid, but it just really affected them in keys. That's why I brought it up. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is gonna solve also a lot of problems the game has, because right now when they try to balance something, they have in mind we're balancing this because it's too powerful in Mythic Plus, or maybe
Mhm.
it's underperforming in Raid, but the change affects the other one as well. So no matter what they do, they're gonna break something, like they're gonna fix something in whatever area they're trying to fix it in, but they're gonna break it for the rest of the game, and that's how the imbalance happens. So yeah, maybe that's a very good idea. And I also add that having such a difficult rate, that's probably only good for the race to world first, because I don't know, maybe we all enjoy watching those guys suffer and pull a boss for 100 plus or 200 plus times, and finally they kill it, and there's like 2 people alive. That looks cool. That's cinema. That's TV, right? But especially for like a regular guild like mine, where like last season we got seen the last possible moment, like we were basically in the race to world last, right? Um, it doesn't matter if they nerf the rate. If these bosses right now are taking so many pulls for the best players in the world, once we get to them, they're also going to take a lot more pulls for us, probably more than the average or something like that, right? So from my perspective, because my guild basically rates 2 nights per week for 3 hours, that's it. That's all the time we have. We have a certain amount of pools that we can do for the whole season, right? Because we're gonna lose a week or two, for example, around New Year's and Christmas and stuff like
Sure.
that. We actually didn't raid for like almost a month, right? So once you sum up all the raiding time that we have, we only have, let's say, I'm gonna come up with the number, but let's say we have like 900 or 1,000 pools overall throughout the whole season for us. And if the raid is going to take more for whatever reason, because for example, Queen Ansrak took us 500 pools to kill last year. Like we had to do extra nights at the end so we can get to that number. So if the raid is too hard and that number basically is over that threshold that we have, which we're like, let's say we're a pretty bad CE guild, right? That's actually going to reflect to the community, because now the rate is going to be perceived with too hard. And I think if you are in a guild where people are committed and they write 2 nights per week, they should be allowed to get far into the raid. They should be allowed to progress. They shouldn't be blocked by blue twisters or kaivezes, which are going to take hundreds of pulls just to kill. So that's my thing. And then the other thing that I'm gonna add is most of the people, we don't do splits. We don't have ults ready to switch, so everybody has their main. That's the thing that you're playing in the raid. And if it gets nerfed and it's not actual anymore, you don't have an option to switch. So basically, you're screwed for the whole tier, for the whole season, and that feels pretty
Yeah,
bad. Yeah.
I agree with that. And I also want to add, I think they should change how they nerf the raid because right now, like Race to World last CE yields are kind of just like relying on them to nerf each boss. Like, okay, there's another nerf coming next week, then you kind of know there's another nerf coming now. Instead of that, I think they should make it more like there's a race to world first level of Mythic, and then there's like a Hall of Fame level of Mythic, and then after Hall of Fame, it gets nerfed one more time, and there should just be like 3 different like levels of Mythic instead of just like, oh, we're gonna nerf this boss now, or we're gonna nerf this boss now. Like, it's very unpredictable when they do it like that. And in some like quote unquote bad CE guilds, I don't want to say that because that's like that sounds kind of like counterintuitive, but those kind of guilds are just relying on these. Oh, when are they gonna nerf this boss? Or they're kind of stuck on this boss. I think a lot of people are stuck on like Silken Court or whatever until the nerf happened, where like you only had to do 4 dispels instead of 5 in the second phase. But I think if they just kept it like that after Hall of Fame, it would just be like a uniform. Okay, this is the difficulty for the rest of the season, and just have it like that for every single boss that they were planning on nerfing afterwards, and just have more like a static difficulty for each level of player.
Yeah, I kind of like the stake. They might as well make like a separate difficulty for like the best guilds in the world, but that's a different topic to
Tournament
talk about.
realm. Yep.
Yeah, because for lower guilds, it's actually a lot of guesswork because you're saying, okay, we have 3 tiers, but we don't know if there's gonna be 3 tiers of nerfs. So now you're stuck in this paralysis analysis. Do we wait for them to nerf it? But then what if they don't nerf it? What do we do then? Because we just wasted time waiting and nothing happened, right? So, yeah, that there's a lot of unpredictable things that happen around the raid, and I don't think that benefits many guilds. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is just my point of view for this specific matter.
I'll add that I think that we do have to be mindful that Blizzard is trying. I will give them credit where credit's due. The shifting sands buff is should be counted as a nerf weekly, or is it every other week or something like that, right? Where
2
they're
weeks, yeah.
increasing your increasing your damage and healing by 1% every 2 weeks. That technically is a progressive system that will help players that haven't gotten that far towards the end of the season be more powerful. In addition to their IO going up, ideally week after week, right? With doing vaults, whether that's mythic vaults or 10s or whatever. So I think my thought is that they're afraid of making big sweeping changes because they're not sure about what the outcome would be and how that would affect the overall. I think that they're okay with players going through some painful moments and having heartbreak moments. I mean, we all know there's skills at the end of the tiers that just fall apart because they hit a wall and they can't continue to come in. And that's always how it's been, right? It's always going to be like that. Even after they make some of these changes, there's always going to be these like defined levels of gameplay based on team play and individual accountability. So you're always going to have that no matter what. I think having a little bit more definition around the higher end, I think makes a lot of sense. But I think they're thinking about it. And when I look at the shifting sands buff, I think that's one way. When you go back to Boolean, I think that's another way of like, eliminating some of the RNG and giving players the things that they want. There's another conversation around splits where it's like, why are you making players at the top level do all these split? I mean, God damn, I was watching Liquid, and it was like, they were doing normal splits like for
Like
8
12
hours,
or
16 hours.
15.
Yeah, that's crazy. They're like begging viewers, like, please, if you have alts, come on. Like, we got like 10 more to go today. And I'm like, it's the end of the week. Like, you guys haven't you haven't even touched Mythic yet. Like, what is going on right now? And I'm seeing videos of them like glorifying normal kill Gallywicks. And I'm like, dude, am I in some weird universe right now? Like, what is happening? So I think, seeing those top players go through that, they have to do something different. I mean, maybe they like it, but it's like maybe they, as in Blizzard, they like, seeing this much activity around the game and viewership and hoping that it's going to bring people back. But at the end of the day, the 3 of us know, and a lot of our viewers know, like when the content gets too challenging, and Blizzard knows too with the 10% nerfs, right? We saw it. When the content is too challenging, where some of the like non-top players have a hard time and hit these walls a lot earlier, they just stop playing. They go play something else. They'll go play Fellowship, or they'll go play League of Legends, or they'll go play, I don't know, Battlefield or something. Like they'll go do something else or go touch grass outside. Like, and I think Blizzard wants to get away from that because they want people addicted to the game. They want people to do keys. They want people to raid. They want people to go do pet battles, whatever. But when the content is too difficult for the average player, talking about the bell curve, they're just gonna stop and they'll just go do something else. So I know they want to change that, but I think they're also afraid of making massive changes.
Yep. Definitely agree with that. And I think the good thing about Mythic Plus is that it's a scaling difficulty. So even if they do like a raw 10% nerf, it doesn't affect the top end. Like they'll just do a higher key, or they'll just do like a key higher. And I think that's why it's like easier to scale M plus and like have it fit better with like average players versus top players. The rating is like a completely different thing, and Mythic is just one difficulty, and it's just really hard to balance for like Race to World first. And on top of that, like to add to the split thing, I did hear Max talk about how like the best players always get burned out by the amount of splits they have to do.
Yeah,
They're
it's
like one of
crazy.
the best players in the world, and they're still like the reason why they don't want to play is because of the splits. Like it's not even because of their skill. So yeah, I definitely think they need to do something about that. But I think even if they did like a static level for each, like Race to World First, Hall of Fame, and regular C, I don't think people would complain about that, especially if they don't reward like better loot. Because at that point, if you're doing Race to War First, you're not doing it for loot. Or if you're doing like Hall of Fame, you're probably most likely just going for that title, right? So I don't think that it would affect it too much if they just made it more like an M plus thing, where it's like you don't get more loot, but you're just doing it for like the glory of having that title or whatever goal that you're trying to reach. So I don't think people would complain if they just had like a mythic difficulty that had like 3 tiers and it doesn't reward extra loot, but it does give you like achievements and title for that thing.
Yeah, I'll
Very-
totally agree as well, because after all, what is the Race to World First? Why is it enjoyed? Because this is cinema. People are watching it, right? But we're actually not involved into it. So if you put those people into like a different realm, or like give them a set of gear or something like that, nobody's going to complain for sure. And I'm also sure that if somehow they remove that requirement to do splits and things like that, those people that are playing in the Race to World First, they're also going to be happy, because I was watching an interview, I think it was Max, maybe it was somebody from Echo, but he said, we have a lot of people applying to our guild, and we basically turn down a lot of them because, or a lot of people turn down themselves once they understand what they need to do, because they're the best players in the world, they're like the best players in their class, but once they understand they have to maintain 16 characters, they're like, I'm out here, like I'm not doing that,
Yeah.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
yeah. So I don't think anybody enjoys that. Like I didn't even watch the splits. Like I just started watching today, basically, when they went into Mythic, right? I didn't care about the part before that because it's, I watched a little bit how they killed Galawix, but that's about it, right? So I don't think anybody enjoys that, and I don't think anyone, even the players in the race, would object if they change it and they put them into like their own race in their own server or something. As long as the entertainment is there, one can still watch it, and it's still they're getting close to killing the bosses, etc. Even if they do that, they're gonna be able to do a lot better job tuning the raid, because right now we end up in some very weird situations. Like they had to like one tank Kaiveza, or they had to like use 3 tanks on Brute Twister at some point and stack different comps and things like that. And I don't think that Blizzard wants to design the bosses so, they're gonna kill it one tanking, right? That was just kind of like collateral damage from the tuning that they've done, but they didn't want to change it during the race, so they let them do it this way. Is that what they wanted to do? I like to think that they didn't, right? I hope they didn't.
Yep.
But this is what they end up with. And then because they don't know what the players are going to achieve, what's going to be their item level, things like that. So they're basically just guessing. And if this environment is basically set in stone and they know what to expect, that's probably also going to allow them to do a better job on tuning, and it's going to be just better experience for everyone. But I don't know. We're just talking. I don't know what they're thinking, or if that's even a possibility. We can only hope, basically.
Yeah, I do agree on like the split part where you said people just don't want to split, and it would be fine if we just gave them gear to just play and just kind of like watch the race, because they do that in TGP. Like you just have a tournament realm and you just get all the gear you need, and all you're doing is pushing. There's no key depletion or anything. you get to do that. And I think they should probably do something similar to that in Race to World First, just because like nobody has fun doing splits, even people that are competing. And yeah, I would think that would just help the player experience way more. We would actually see more competitive Race to World First, because there would be more better players that are playing in it, because
Exactly.
like you said, like there's people that are just unwilling to join that are really good players because of the splitting thing. So we might get even better players competing if we do that. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you said.
Yeah, the challenge there, I think, is the fact that if you have a situation like a tournament realm where you can just have anything with anything, the Blizzard's trying to avoid, like, okay, if we bring 17 fire mages, we'll one shot this, right? Like, so that's the biggest concern, and I think it's probably valid. What I think, and there's always going to be a way around this. I give a lot of thought to this. Like, how do you prevent that? Well, maybe you create a tournament realm where they have to do a certain number of hours of things to qualify for that gear, to unlock the gear for that specific character. But you still couldn't avoid it, because then they'll just do that on 5 different accounts, and then they'll have 5 or 6 different, right? Like, they have the money at the Race for the World First, so they can have 16 accounts now, and they'll do 10 hours on every single account to get the same thing. So they can have 5 fire mages, or they can have 10, whatever. Like, so it's interesting in the sense that, you want to give players quality of life so they don't feel like they have to do this. The thing is like, it's also a competitive thing. So even if you create a system that makes it a little more easy on the player for quality of life, the top of the top is always going to look for that 1% advantage, where it's like, okay, well, now this is easier, but now that means we can do more of this. And it's just, it's never ending. It's just a never ending cat and mouse game of like, what do we got to do to be the best? How can we gamify this so that we can be better? And and that's just human nature. They always want that little advantage to be at the top. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that reminds me of like so back when I played Classic, one thing I didn't like about it was how grindy it was. And I prefer games where like your skill matters more. And I feel like in retail that is definitely the case compared to Classic, obviously. And although I do agree like it's really hard to balance like removing splits and just giving people everything, I still feel like they should go towards that direction, because like gearing for splits and everything, that's not really like a skill. That's just like you have to spend more time, and it just makes the game like grindier. And I know it's like kind of difficult to deal with that right now, because from what I know, Race to World First isn't sponsored by Blizzard, while TGP and MDI are actually like Blizzard tournaments. So I remember like back then they used to have like 4 DPS and run no healer, and then Blizzard had to change the rules and say, oh, you're not allowed to swap specs after you zone into the dungeon or whatever. And they could just do that easily with TGP because it was a tournament sponsored by them. But if they were to like do something like that for Race to World First, then they would have to provide another tournament realm and have like a specific like Race to World First difficulty plus their own like tournament realm for that. But I think it's definitely possible, and I feel like people would prefer that, because that would be more of an expression of your skill rather than like how much time you're spending grinding out all the gear and stuff.
Agree.
Yeah, I also agree, and I'll also say that yeah, it's a difficult problem, but they can definitely look for ways to solve it. And if they do that realm and like they make it like an event, this is also going to remove that difference between North American and European servers, because there is a difference there, right? You can argue a lot who has the advantage, but they're not on equal terms. They're not having an equal start, right? So that just adds on top of the splits and the RNG of the gear and everything like that. So I think this is also going to remove that little element and make it even more fair at the end. Okay. So
Yeah.
I want to touch on that.
Go ahead.
Wait, one thing. I'm sorry, Wolvie, because it's an interesting point you brought up. But I heard something that I thought about before, but then I heard Max say it last night. Literally, it was like at midnight, and he was being interviewed in the secret labs, whatever. And he made a comment that I was like, I knew it. So he was saying like there's certain advantages, and he likes this rate, the way that this rate is built, because they can prog on a boss And then if a different guild is progging a different boss in Mythic, they get insights, free insights into what's going on
Yep.
there. And so I don't always, I think that there's some advantages for EU when it comes to like having the other teams figure it out. And this went back even a few days before. They were talking about how Method at one point like was voting and the guild didn't want to stream, and they were like, no, we're going to stream. Obviously it pays, right? We're going to stream anyway. And they almost lost that race. And they felt like if they streamed and lost, that was going to be the last time they ever streamed. Like, and thankfully they won, and it now has opened this up. But I think it's always something interesting to think about, like the advantages, the disadvantages of like being a first starter versus like having information that's going to let you have less pulls on a boss to get you to some of those other bosses a little bit quicker and
Yeah,
get you
and
caught
we're
up.
having
Just
this
interesting.
conversation because there is this discrepancy of this guy start
Yeah.
first, this guy start later.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
It's not a competition. Like,
Yeah.
imagine if you're like running a running race and this guy's like 10 meters ahead
You
of you
guys
at
get
the
to
start.
start.
Like,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's a little bit
Yeah.
different year, and as I said, we can argue who has the advantage, but there's not equal start. Like, it doesn't matter who has the advantage.
Yeah.
It's not equal, right? We can agree on that point. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there
And
was
then on
only
top of
one
that,
ever. Mhm. Go
they
ahead.
can like tune Mythic differently on live if
Yep.
they do like Resource
That's
on a
true.
separate realm.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's gonna be more
Yep.
acceptable
Eh,
for guilds like us once we get there instead of waiting for nerfs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So
Exactly.
just
But
quick last few words about the raid. What is our like looking forward? What is our expectation for this raid? Is it doomed? Is it going to be amazing? Is it going to be somewhere in the middle? What are you guys thinking based on everything we've seen so far?
So far, I think the raid is really fun. I normally don't like raiding. Like I said, like last season, I didn't really have fun raiding. First four bosses were way too easy, and then fifth boss Avanax was like mostly a weak or a boss. But this
Mhm.
season, most of the fights are pretty interesting. They have their own mechanics. It's pretty unique. A lot of the things you haven't seen yet, like sticks, the roly poly stuff, like that's pretty interesting. And then the bikes in the first boss. Some
Yep.
people would argue like, oh, I don't want to get picked when I pop my cooldowns, but overall, I think it's very fun. Especially, I think Sprocketmonger is definitely like a very interesting boss. I've never seen a boss like that before. I know I haven't played for that long, but even from people that have been raiding for like years, they still really enjoy that boss. And I think overall, outside of like the fact that heroic is too hard right now, everything else I think is very interesting.
Okay.
And actually did not get bored. I
Okay.
didn't get bored at all, like doing heroic. I did get bored doing normal because it was just like we just did the same thing 3 times, smashing through it. But on heroic for sure, especially I was playing 2 disc priests and I was learning my ramp timings for each fight and stuff. But
Yeah.
that was definitely very interesting for me, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, my perspective, man, like the first couple bosses and the outside part, I was like, whatever, it's normal. There was cool mechanics and stuff. But man, I play poker and I love Vegas. And going into the casino the first time was amazing. I was like, this looks awesome. And then fighting the slot machine boss, the one-armed bandit, like and the coin and getting the buff, and it was so fun. I've enjoyed it so far. I don't think it's doomed. I think they'll probably scale it, but I felt like they put a lot more effort into the design of some of the fights. The visuals are a little more obvious now, which is really nice. So I think they're making progress in the right direction. I don't think things are overly complicated. Going back to the whole Weakors boss, in season 1, I think that they are listening to the feedback from the community at all levels, whether it's the highest levels or even, just general feedback. So I think it's going the right way. And I think that I hope, and I say this all the time, small and frequent changes it just is going to go a long way for the community in general. So that's my take.
All right. And I'll kind
Yeah,
of
and
join.
also,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I think this season so far, they have been listening to the community way more. And I think if they continue to do that for both Rated and Mythic Plus, and even PvP, like everything, they will definitely like make the game way better for the players.
Yeah, we can only hope. I'll just join
Yeah.
saying that the raid is looking fine. Like I'm not much of like a casino guy, so the whole vibe for me, I know it's cool, but like I don't care. But the bosses do look cool. Like the mechanics are very interesting from everything I've seen so far. So I'm actually really looking forward to it. My only scare is that obviously there's going to be a lot of nerfs coming up, but my only scare is that we don't have like 4 very very hard bosses as we had last year, because obviously I don't play in Hall of Fame guild or anything like that. So I just don't want to have 4 bosses back to back, 300 plus pulls for every single one of them. You know, that was it's good to proc some of those bosses, but having too many of them one after the other, that's definitely not enjoyable. So I just hope that this difficulty curve that everybody's talking about so much ends up being something that's interesting, that's pleasant to go through, and it's not annoying at the end. But for this one, only time will tell. Up until then, I'm only positive about this rate. Okay. So
Awesome.
let's do something fun for the end. Now that we've seen enough of season 2, let's do a very quick tier list, because we kept you here for a while now. About all the healers, and what do we think now after we've played with them for this first week, or at least some of them, because I actually didn't play many ults. I was too scared that my main is going to be left behind, so I didn't play too many ults. But let's talk about each of the healers and see how they feel in both Raid and Mythic Plus, and whether or not they're going to be enjoyable this season, maybe meta, or you will need to be like avoiding them and not playing them as certain classes that we're going to get to. All right. I guess let's go first with you know what? Let's start with Discipline Priest. I think this is gonna be first on the list. Because we see Discipline Priest in the Race to World first. If you open the highest time keys right now with people who are like over 3k IO already, the majority of healers there, I would say at least 50% is Discipline Priests. So all the changes that they've done to the class are quite positive. So to me, it seems that this season is still going to be Discipline Priest is the king of all healers. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. So I don't normally do tier lists because people always do a tier list and then things change right after that and they're like, oh no, I gotta make a new tier list now. But yeah, I agree. Right now, Dispraise is probably by far like the best healer in Raid right now. In keys, it is the best overall healer because it does the most damage. It has like really good kit for most of the fights and everything. I will say though, one difficult thing about this priest is a lot of people are playing VDH now because it is a tank that is living more than Prop Paladin right now. And this priest is pretty hard to play without a vengeance or without a Prop Paladin and without an AUG. So I think if it is a little bit misleading to just look at the leaderboard and say, oh yeah, this priest is definitely the best healer. Because I have been playing Resto Druid more recently, and I think throughput-wise, Resto Druid is probably doing more. And the main reason currently people aren't playing it in hierarchies is because it just doesn't do as much damage as this priest, and it doesn't have PI. And so I think the main thing that will put Resto Druid ahead in the meta is if Shadow Priest gets another buff and it just becomes the meta, and you're not going to play this with Shadow. That's not going to be a good comp, especially like low kicks. And if you're not playing with a Prop Paladin, this priest does not have a kick, and you're just going to be really low on kicks. So Disc Priest Prop Paladin is a really good combo, and healers normally depend more on the tank and DPS meta, as long as you can heal through the fights. And right now, Resto Druid is looking way better in terms of like throughput, raw throughput. So I would also put Resto Druid in like the legendary tier.
Okay.
Right now.
Let me also add that I was looking into some stats. Surprisingly, there are not that many Resto Druids in the top in the hierarchies right now, but that's probably because of the reason that you just mentioned. However, there are a couple. Also, all 3 guilds right now in Mythic Raid to World First are actually running 1 Resto Druid. So that is also seems to be something that's quite relevant in the raid. I've seen quite a few of them being run in Heroic. So it also shapes up to be not only healer with a lot of potential, but it's also a little bit versatile in the sense that you can play it in both Mythic Plus and Raid, and you shouldn't be feeling sorry for it. So yeah, I also agree. Do we just put this into Legendary as well? Probably for now we can put it behind Disc Priest, but only time will tell if they're not going to change places.
Yeah, for sure. And it really helps them become meta. They've been druids have been meta for the past like expansion and last season in some sort of way because they bring
Yeah.
verse buff. And if it's not resto, it's like bear or boomkin, or feral. But one of those specs is always gonna be good. So
Yeah.
it just I could go either direction depending on the 0.5 patch and whether Blizzard does anything to either disc or druid or any of the comps that they play with. So I would say both are like pretty equal right now. And most of the higher players aren't really pushing keys right now because they're just gearing their character. So it's kind of really
Yeah.
hard to tell just based off of the leaderboard right now.
Yeah, that's also true. And I also add that they do have a druid in the raid, but that's probably because they're not taking a tank druid, and apparently Pharaoh and even Moon King are not looking that good. So the reason that we have a rest druid in the race to world first might be
Talking a
just
while,
because
baby.
the other specs are not that good. But as I said, only time will
Yeah, it's
tell.
probably just it's just the best druid spec right now to
Okay,
play in raid. Yeah.
let's talk about Preservation Evoker next. So we talked in the previous episodes how augmentation is probably going to be dead. It seems that it's actually going to be the case, and we also thought that okay, now that 98% of the evokers are not actually going to be playing augmentation, maybe just maybe this is going to open the door for preservation to shine and maybe devastation, etc. Uh, but I don't think I've seen. So here's the weird thing. So obviously we haven't seen Preservation Evoker in the Race to World First, but if you open the heroic locks in the raids, the top healers there in many of the bosses are actually Preservation Evokers. So they're pumping. They have a lot of HPS. You're not gonna see maybe any of them in Mythic Plus, but after everything I said, I still don't think that's a bad healer. I think it's a pretty damn nice healer. It has a lot of HPS. It has a potential to do a lot of damage. Maybe the main problem is that it's kind of like complicated to play it because there's a lot of interactions between different skills that you need to be aware of. And a long story short, you can probably achieve the same things with some of the other healers without that added complexity and skill cap level that's required to play it. So those are my thoughts on the evoker. Anything that you guys want to add?
Yeah, so I agree with most of your points, and I haven't really looked at Prez as much, so it's more from like listening to other people that are playing it. But I definitely think the throughput is there for a rating, especially in keys. It is like a little weird because people that are playing Evoker right now are playing Dev. It is doing a lot of damage in both raid and keys. So they're probably not going to play both at the same time. And compared to Disc and Resto Druid, they're they're at like a probably like a tier or two below. So I would say they're probably like in the middle, like playable tier maybe.
Yeah, so they're
But
definitely
yeah.
playable. The question is, do they go to pretty good? But maybe just they fall off short for that. And the reason is not because of their performance in general, but maybe because of the complexity, maybe because of the other classes and the other specs that you're using and the other healers. It's kind of like it's not their fault, but they're there.
Yeah, they're yeah, I would say like playable tier for now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, jumping into the Mistweaver. When I was looking into the charts, the best competitor to Disc Priest in the Mythic Plus scene seemed to be exactly Mistweaver. Also, there's a couple of Mistweavers from the four healers that the guilds are running in the right to World First, so it's also pumping there. It brings a buff on top of everything else. We also praised it a lot for all the changes that happened to that class before we actually
Yeah.
went into that patch. So I think we were not wrong. It's still up there, and for me personally, I wouldn't mind also putting that into a legendary. Of course, with the notion that we don't know how things are going to change in the next few weeks. If we put all three of them up there, one of them is kind of like guaranteed to fall down a little bit, and it's probably hard to guess which one it's going to be right now. But just looking right now, from where we're standing, it seems that Mistweaver is performing pretty damn well.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
I
definitely
think it's
agree with that. Oh,
legendary.
go ahead
Mm-hmm.
if you
Oh
wanted to
yeah, I
say
agree.
something. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that as well. I would put it above Resto Druid right now, like at the current moment.
Yeah.
However, I will say that Mistweaver, like I said earlier, like healers always depend on the comp and everything. And the reason why Mistweavers have not been like the top meta, despite it having like the most HPS or like just as comparable as this priest, is because the meta has always been a caster comp, and Mistweaver just doesn't really fit into that as much because they buff melee. They don't bring verse or fort or PI, and it's not because of their HPS. They've always been just not really fitting with the caster comp. However, because Og is just dead right now, they have a chance because there could be like a melee comp that they're really good with. And currently, people are playing Enhance, Feral, and a bunch of like other melee specs. So they definitely have a way higher chance of becoming the main meta this season. And right now, they are pretty much on par with Resto Druid and Dispriest in terms of throughput, and they are being played in Raid as well.
Yeah, and probably for Mythic Plus specifically, whatever the comp ends up being, then this is going to determine which is gonna be the healer. It's not going to be, oh,
Yeah.
this one is better than the
Right.
other one. It's like, oh, this one actually fits better, right? So,
Yep.
Yep.
all right, let's go to the Holy Paladin, which we kind of doomed even before this episode. I will say one thing though. I was looking into the Mythic Plus charts, and there was one Paladin at the very top. Alismir is actually back playing the Holy Paladin, and
Nice.
yeah, so that's I guess the only positive though, because he spent last season playing like red and tanking and playing different classes, like he didn't even want to touch Holy Paladin. But like there's some paladins that you can see in the rate charts as well, so they're not completely unplayable and abandoned. Uh, but I haven't touched it, to be honest, since the PTR. But on the PTR, it felt pretty bad to play with it. Like I was pressing my buttons, health bars were not moving, so that was obnoxious. And I'm still not sold that even if they change something, because that 4% health healing buff that you mentioned earlier, I don't think that's sufficient. But even if they change something else, they've done so many things to the Holy Paladin recently, and most of them were not in a positive direction. Right now, I'm just not optimist. Like, I have no problem putting this into the bottom, into the meh, although I think it's playable to a certain degree. But I just don't want to bother with it because they're just, there's like, when you look into the Blizzard, I don't see the motivation or any kind of like chances for them to actually bring it back up to where it needs to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And oh well, Ellesmere always plays Holy Paladin at the start of
Yeah.
season. He played it at the start of last season as well until he just gave up on it and swapped to Prot and Ret. However, this season Ret is looking way better, and then Prot is still looking decent. So like the chances of Prot or Holy Paladin being meta in keys is not very likely, and especially because there's three healers that are really competitive right now, and they're all just miles above Holy Paladin. So yeah, I would definitely put it in the med tier. It's probably like one of the worst healers right now.
Yeah, and then even if you want to play it in raid, you easily get outperformed by the other healers there. So it's
Yep.
like, why is this happening? But it is. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Rest in peace, Holy Paladin. We'll get back to you later on in the season and see if it changed. But even like personally, I was thinking if I ever touch my Paladin again, I'll probably play it as Sprout and Red, but I don't think I'll heal on it this season. Hopefully, I'm wrong. All right, let's talk about Holy Priest, which is looking good into raids. Like the priests in the Race to World First are disciplined, but if you go down a tier, most of the priests are actually opting to play as Holy in the raid. So it's always looking good there for some reason. Maybe because I play with some very good Holy Priests, but they seem to be pumping in the raid. When it comes to Mythic Plus, yeah, like if you're playing priest in your group and the priest is healing, then why are they not disc? You know, that's the only question when it comes to Holy Paladin and Holy Priest in Mythic Plus. But overall, it's looking it's like 50-50 because it's looking good in the raid, and in Mythic Plus we don't really know because nobody's gonna play it. So that puts it somewhere in the middle for me. But I'm interested to hear what you guys thinking.
I want to chime in on this one. I think my opinion, and you probably already know where it is, Wolvie, is this is meh, and here's why. Holy Priest and Keys is just can you do good? Yes. Is it, why would you do that to yourself? I don't know, when you can just push one button, get disc. Great.
Yeah.
I think the same thing is applied in Raid. I think Holy Priest is like the easy mode heal. I think, but disc, if you play it well, it's so good with damage and healing that it's like, why play Holy unless you just don't know how to play disc? So for me personally, I think Holy Priest is a good it's a good class if you're like trying to get into healing and you want to like heal bars and like go down and you push a button and they go up. And but once you start to get higher into the keys, and that's going to change really quick. And I think the damage profile doesn't really play well. I think they're trying to fix that and some of the changes that they did for Holy Priest, but I still don't think it's there. And then again, on the raid, I think disc is just superior at all levels when you talk about it. So you have the option, just push the button, go to disc, spend some time on it, watch some videos. But to me, Holy Priest is meh, my opinion.
Okay, Katsa, do you want to try and save him to the playable state, or we just dump it down?
So I think it is only playable in raid. It is, you can play a Holy Priest with a Disc Priest, or Rick Reverb is not a very good fight for a Disc Priest, the third boss. So like you could play Holy in that fight, but it is pretty much completely dead in keys. I think it definitely needs more like defensives because it just doesn't live right now, and like some sort of external, like Guardian Spirit is not really a good defensive. It's a cheat death, and you have to apply it, and then if it procs, it's 3-minute cooldown. It's just not very good. And then like I would only play it in raid and some fights, but even then, like you could just play disc for the entire raid. And it's different than last season, because last season this was actually not as good, and Holy was just shining in raid. So at the very least, I would make it playable, but only in raid. But otherwise, I would keep it at meh.
So do we agree with my cook here? I just added a new rank above meh, below playable, and I called it rate, and we just stick it there.
Yeah,
I'm saying
probably.
it's terrible. I'm sorry, Holy Priests, come after me in the comments. It's fine, but even in raid, as Katsa said, like, okay, maybe one fight, maybe. I mean, can you perform and keep up? Kinda. Yeah, you could. If you're a gamer, you can play, but I mean, why do that to yourself when you can just be a superior
I think you
spec
can
and
just
roll good?
keep it at the meh tier with Holy Paladin.
Okay,
For
you
sure.
convinced me. Let's go to the rest of Sharon. I'll let you guys talk first because this is my main decision, so I'm obviously biased, and I'm interested to hear what you think.
Okay, that's actually very interesting because Shaman is one of my split characters for a raid, and it is was my main for raid last year. It was really good last year, outside of like some of the mana issues and whatever. And this tier, I just did some keys on it, and then raid. So I actually think Shaman right now is really good. I would put it in a pretty good tier because throughput wise it's there, and then for keys it always has utility no matter what. It's probably like the best pug healer. If you're pugging and you need stops, it has a cap totem, it has 30-second knock up, it has a 12-second kick, and it has like pretty decent cooldowns like Spirit Link, like whatever. They don't have AG anymore, but they don't really need it. And I've been playing the Cloudburst build in Raid, and it seems to line up really well with like all the damage events and stuff. I just put a Cloudburst down, and then whenever the damage comes out, I just do like a ton of healing. And I was actually pumping a lot in Raid as well. So, but the reason why I wouldn't put it in Legendary is because I still think the other 3 healers are just a tier above it, and people are probably going to play Enhance. And that means like Resto is just not going to be there. They're not going to run. They already have that one mastery buff, and that is part of the reason why Resto fell off in keys last season as well. So yeah, I would put it in the pretty good tier.
Okay.
I'm gonna agree there 100%. I think I think it's amazing in keys. I love the in raid. I play it's in one of the teams. That's what I play as Resto Shaman, and I feel like the mana change was huge. I'm not like super anxious over my mana right now in raids, which was like last season. It was like, oh, I'm out of mana. I need to innervate, or I'm dropping mana tide total. Like it was painful. Now it feels like it's way more sustainable. I'm still doing really good heals with it. And then in keys, like you said, all the things you mentioned, utility is just crazy. I like it. I think it deserves pretty good, and only not legendary because of the compositions and what the other healers are bringing and what the other specs for.
Oh, and to add, it is
Specifically enhanced. Mhm.
to add to that, it is missing what is it called? External. It doesn't have like
Mhm.
pain sub or cocoon or bark. So that's like the one downside in keys for Resto Shaman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I use the Spirit Link Totem as my external
External,
when
yeah.
I know tank doesn't have something, and I'll just drop Spirit Link. But yeah,
Yeah,
but it's
same,
not
but
it's not the
it's
same
not the
thing.
same though.
It's
Yeah.
it's definitely not the same.
Yeah. I'm
Oh.
just gonna add my biggest concern is actually mana in raids, because if the fight goes a little bit longer, especially when you're progging into the start and your DPS is not where it needs to be, mana is actually, if you're not playing careful, could be a big issue. But other than that, I'm actually loving it, right? As you said, you can play the Cloud Burst. You can even play the Healing Stream Totem in raid. It's totally fine. It's doing a ton of healing. It's a lot of fun. And then in Mythic Plus, obviously, even if you're pugging, that's probably the best choice. Whether or not I'm gonna finish pushing on the Resto Shaman at the end of the season, it's definitely going to be my main for the raid, from what it seems. Uh, I don't know, but it's definitely going to be up there for me. It's a lot of fun to play. Yeah, as you said, it's probably, especially if you're pugging, that might be a much better choice compared to, let's say, Disc Priest or Resto Druid, which are actually not that easy to play in pugs and not coordinated groups. So yeah,
Yep.
I would agree. Probably falls a little bit short from the legendary tier, specifically if you're playing for the the highest keys in organized group. You can get much more value out of the other healers, but other than that, it's up there. Yeah.
Yep. I agree. And then, but I do like that Resto Shaman is very chill, because I was playing in 3 splits. 2 of them were Disc Priests, and I had to learn ramp timings and always think about like, oh, it's 8 seconds until this mechanic. I gotta start my ramp, and then Resto Shaman, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna pop Healing Tide right now. I'm gonna
Yep.
put like Cloudburst Totem down, and then just it
Riptide,
just
some
feels way more
heals.
chill to play.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So
Have you curious? Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to ask a question. I'm
yeah.
curious if you play Resto Druid at all in raid, because it feels like Disc Priest a little bit, where you're really watching those timings.
Not really much, no. But I have played it a couple times, like in Pugs during Dragonflight Season 4. And that was when like mana mattered for Resto Druid. So it's probably a little different now. But yeah,
Yeah, it's fun. It's like, it has, but it's not chill like Shaman. It feels like Disc Priest, but it's fun. It's still good to see the numbers go. It's crazy. It does good healing.
yeah, it's really good on fights where there's a ton of rot damage for sure.
I'm looking forward to one day when I'll play something in raid that doesn't use mana. But yeah, I don't know when that's gonna happen. But yeah, this is our tier list, guys. Obviously, it's going to change a lot. Also, I'm gonna say that it doesn't have the shape of F. We have LB Ninja as a guest in some of our episodes here, and when we do a tier list with him, his only goal is to make the tier list look like the letter F, right? This time we managed not to do that, so I'll take that as a W, although it doesn't look like a W. Yeah, so that's our tier list again. Any final words? Anything else that we've missed or you want to talk about at the end of the show?
Oh yeah, I also want to add to the tier list because even though like there's 3 legendary and then there's a pretty good and playable, I think all of the healers are playable outside of like maybe Holy Paladin and Holy Priest right now. Like, so if you're pugging or whatever and you really like Prez or Resto Shaman, they're still really playable. So I would say like take this tier list with a grain of salt and just don't worry too much about like, oh, I gotta play the absolute best. Especially right now. Like before the 0.5 patch, there is no like good meta right now. And I played Resto Shaman in a pug. It felt really good. So even though
Mhm.
it's not like legendary in like the most pre-made comps and everything, I would still play it.
And I will
Yeah.
also add, looking forward to those 0.5 patches, because if you remember back in Dragonflight when they did the first Holy Paladin rework, that was in a 0.5 patch, right? So basically, the TLDR here is Blizzard knows what's going on with Holy Paladin and with Holy Priest. So once that patch comes around, they're probably gonna buff them. And up until this point, it's totally fine to play those as ults or even as mains and push up to like plus 10s or even plus 12s. It's gonna be
Yep.
totally fine at that level, right? So there's nothing wrong into playing those characters, gearing them, and then who knows? In few weeks, at the end of April, I think is when we're getting the next 0.5 patch. They might become the meta, so you never know. So don't lose complete hope and don't give up on them. I guess is the short conclusion that we can draw here.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Okay, so
Well, Katsa, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Yeah,
yeah.
it was awesome having you on.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And it was really nice talking to you guys, especially because you're both healer mains and you can just relate on a lot of different things.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
you're a little bit out of our league. We play a little bit in the lower level, but for us at least, it was very interesting to talk to you. Looking forward to eventually having you again on the podcast. Definitely looking forward to see how everything is going to shape up with you, because in my eyes, you've basically achieved everything there's to be achieved in the game. But obviously, your goals are even higher than that. So I would definitely love to see you in, let's say, TGP, or one of the guilds that are in the race to world first right now. Who knows? You might actually enjoy that. And also,
Rank
guys,
one
Yeah,
gladiator. Rank one gladiator.
definitely
or
like
that.
the better you get at the game, the more you realize there's more things to look at. So for
Yeah.
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
We have a saying here: the appetite comes with the meals. So the more you get, the more appetite you get. So
Exactly.
yeah. So yeah, definitely check out the links below if you want to find out more about Katsa, YouTube, Twitch, and everything that she's involved with. There's some good content there, as she said, guides and things that she's going to try to teach you, and also I think it's going to be very interesting tracking her journey through World of Warcraft. So yeah, thank you very much again for being here, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye bye, and take care.
Bye. Bye, Katsa. Bye, everybody.
Bye.